Thank you, Mark, and appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate the leadership of the Leman Conference to include the human aspect into a discussion about science and disease control. And so we created Summit Precision Production in 2018 to address two issues in the industry. One, this labor issue, and two, to create digital platforms for protein production to manage decision-ready information with an emphasis on humans and production. And so we believe that people are the gateway to innovation in this industry. And there's a lot of talk about precision production. There's a lot of talk about how to integrate innovation, and we believe people are that source and that gateway of innovation. So we set out to do a labor intel study to understand some of the dynamics of labor, and we had some partners that worked alongside us, and we wanted to recognize them for their contribution and their leadership in this topic. So why a labor intel study? The lack of qualified labor, as we just heard, is one of the top issues that producers talk about at meetings like this. How do we deal with this labor issue? Gallup has an engagement survey out that looks at the impact on business performance of engagement, and we all look at this year after year after year, and it doesn't seem to improve. And so we sought out to figure that out. Why do we still have a problem? Companies that have low turnover organizations and high turnover organizations have a 25% and a 65% better or worse retention with lower engaged people. Productivity and business performance is 20% better on higher engaged teams. And so we sought to find, why do we still have a problem? There are scads of information out there, scads of books, a lot of buzzwords, a lot of people talking about it. How do we make an impact? How do we understand the hidden cost of labor? Much of the labor cost of turnover and things like that does not hit P&L sheets on companies. It gets lost in the buckets of just overall labor cost. And so we sought to look at, what is that hidden cost? We sought to bring science and to organizational fit and job matching jobs to people's skill sets. And we sought to apply proven research in industrial psychology on how to understand people and how to make a good judgment on how to pick people. I got some statistics, so I need a few notes. So what defines swine production's irresistible place to work? I love Patrick Lencioni, and he has a book called 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And those 3 signs that drive a lot of turnover are immeasurement, irrelevance, and anonymity. And we'll talk a little bit about those. We all know this intuitively. We all deal with it every day, and so why is it so hard to do? So we conducted a labor study that we'll talk about here in a minute, and once we got all the data compiled, we had an insight meeting where we brought all the systems in to discuss the data. We revealed the data. We brought in some outside speakers, experts in human resources and in employee engagement. And at the end of the session, we had a 24-hour session where we just jammed on labor and its impact on our businesses. At the end of that session, we broke out in what we call huddle groups, and we said, what are the top 5 things after all of this information, after all of this interaction with our people, with our peers here, what are the top 5 things that define an irresistible place to work? And this is what we came up with. And the number 1 was culture. And culture impacts teamwork, it impacts team goals and objectives, it impacts task performance, and it impacts job satisfaction. And you'll see how we correlated some of those things to business performance or productivity performance within these companies. But Peter Drucker said culture eats strategy for lunch or for breakfast. And how do we define or how do we build tools to drive culture and engagement in our farms. So the study background, we had 7 systems. We had around estimated 5% of the U.S. sow herd. We surveyed 103 people that were chosen strategically for the study in all levels of production, and it was about 12 farms represented. Our key study variables are to the right, with the majority of our effort to look at what is the correlation to pigs weaned per mated female as the indicator for business performance. So the tools that we used, SIFT HR is a company run by Dr. Justin Wiegand, who is an industrial psychologist, and he is a certified PXT Select professional, and so we used PXT Select to create our model. Swine Management Services, Valerie will speak here in a minute on job satisfaction and benchmarking. And then Summit has a product called Humatech that is a digital version of human intelligence that looks at team dynamics on a farm or on however you want to break down your system. And so for the purpose of this research, we did not include the cloverleaf information, but we do have that if somebody would like to see that. So why use assessments when hiring? Humans are not as good as picking people, at least I would speak for myself, I'm not as good as picking people as I thought I was. And how many have seen the movie Moneyball, where Brad Pitt, the guy pulls him off in the hallway and he starts to chew him out because he doesn't know anything about what we're doing here. You need guys that have been in the business for 50 years, and Brad Pitt looks at him and says, I watch you as you sit at the table with those parents and those kids, and you tell them that they don't have what it takes, and you think you know, and you don't. And so what we ran across is a study by Smith and Hunter that looked at the validity and the predictability using industrial psychology to predict the performance of people that you're looking to hire. And it's one of the most cited studies in industrial psychology, where they meta-analyzed every study ever published that evaluated a predictive nature of the hiring process. And what they determined that there's 3 buckets that every job, no matter what time, space, and this study goes back 85 years to the beginning to the 1900s. Cognitive ability, personality, and interest and motivation are better predictors of performance than a job interview. And so if you look at the data from Smith and Hunter, the predictability of that person's performance is actually the same by having them do the assessment as it would if you sat and interviewed them. And if you check references and some of these other standard methods, it's actually less effective than the assessments. And so we sought out to look at a method to figure out how do we predict, how do we develop a model to have an organizational fit. The costs of poor performance and turnover are high. The Society for Human Resource Management says it could be up to 30%. Smith and Hunter said the same thing in some of their work. Could be up to 30% of the salary of a mid-level blue-collar worker. So I kind of put together a little model that looked at 5,600 sows, about 140,000 pigs produced, 35% turnover, which is about, I'm figuring about 18 full-time people in that farm. 35% turnover, you're bringing 6.3 people into the farm on an annual basis. If you Schrum says that it takes about 2 years for a worker to reach 100% productivity by the time you look at his learning curve. So productivity costs alone, operating at 85%, could be as high as 30 cents a pig. And then you look at separation costs. I have those at about $2,000 of an employee in recruiting and cultural disruption. You can see a pathway to a 30% of first year salary, which could in some cases end up to be 58 cents a pig. That does kind of get lost in the labor bucket. And so we wanted to understand that aspect and understand the financial implications of that. So our method and what we measured, PXT is an assessment. It's a online assessment. It's used in industry all of the time. And we had 103 participants take the PXT test. Then we had a series of assessments that we had developed through SMS and that measured some of these performance indicators. And then we blended the two to produce a performance fit model. And this model is exclusive to this group based on, PXT does not offer it. It is an exclusive model that was developed in this study. And it looks at thinking style, behavioral traits, and interest to determine the customization job fit model. So the logic behind the scale is the black number indicates, and if anybody wants to be real detailed, I'll put you in touch with Justin Wiegand because he did the analysis on it. But the black is the high performance people. The red is the low performance people. And this is based on manager assessments and reviews of task performance. And I believe there's some production numbers in here as well. And so they used this and used a plus or minus 1 standard deviation to get the band of the objective judgment, as an example of an objective judgment scale. And so that objective judgment scale is generated by questions in the PXT model when people take the assessment. So we have 4 assessments that we developed. Supervisors, farm managers. Supervisors would be probably similar to a departmental lead. And looking at learning index, verbal skills, numerical ability, these are the 3 buckets that Smith and Hunter talked about, that every job has these 3 skills that need to be used in some fashion. And you can see how the scale slides a little bit with the different roles that happen within the farm. And then we did entry-level farrowing and entry-level breeding. And you can kind of see how the comparisons rate. And the way PXT works is it's a progressive assessment that gets tougher as you answer the questions correctly. And so it seeks to find where your threshold is of intellectual capacity, I guess if you want to say that, and then it plugs you into the model depending on which one you're interviewing for, or which one you're working with. So then we also looked at how the job fit model would apply for somebody that's applying for a farm manager position. And so this is how their results would place on the scale. Now there's a lot of data behind this. This report is about 10 pages, Valerie, something like that kind of dissects the person's where they placed on the scale, how they placed on the scale. But this gives you an idea of how we determine the overall match for that position. This person is 65% match on a farrowing position, 85% match on a farm manager position. Often we don't have the luxury of choosing people, and so we do not promote this in our work as a all or nothing type situation. But the point that we try to look at is it gives us more intelligence than what we have sitting across the table interviewing, and it allows us to streamline our training and management protocols to fit the person. So we did some correlation findings as well based on some of our assessments, and we looked at the correlation to pigs weaned per mated female. So we had a significant significant relationship with task performance, job satisfaction, rehire agreement, and organizational citizenship behavior, which is just helping behavior, and many of those are all managers and supervisors' assessments of the individual. So one of the key points, or the 2 bullet points that we came out of this study is, and it's intuitive, we all kind of know it, task performance relates to about a 0.95 increase in PSY per point of increase in task performance assessment. For every point that job satisfaction goes up, and Valerie will show you some of those assessments here shortly, we get an increase of PSY of 1.08. And so what it's driven us to do at SPP is further explore how do we develop systems to build culture, to build job satisfaction, to turn the tide on some of these issues so that we can unlock human performance. And with that, I'll turn it over to Valerie, and she's going to go through some of the production and job satisfaction analytics.
So part of the study was pulling all of the farms into the SMS database. And so when we look here, we've got 824 farms in our database with about 1.5 million sows. And then the diamonds represent where the farms in the study fell. There are not 12 dots there because there were multiple farms in some of those categories. But when we look at the system overall, they averaged about 26.31 pigs weaned per mated female per year for a 52-week period of time, compared to our database at 26.33, so really close to average. When we looked at sow death loss, our database has a huge variation. We've got farms that are under 2%, and we've got farms that are over 22%, and some of those over 22% aren't even diseased challenged farms. So think about that for a second. The study group, much tighter, from 4% to 14%, although slightly higher than our average at 11.6 versus our database at 10.2%. Jason Ross referenced about 13% this morning in their pelvic organ prolapse study. We also looked at piglet survival, which is a component of stillborns and pre-weaning mortality. Slightly closer here in the ranges, and again, right at average for the 12 farms in the study compared to where our database is. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is, what is ideal staffing? How do I know how many people I need in a barn? And so we wanted to look at that a little bit here too. And so we've got 12 farms, and we looked at the number of sows per team member. The blue farms here are at 27.5 pigs weaned per mated female per year or higher, compared to the green farms. So we've got a fair amount of variation there. And as facilities have changed, as we've converted from farrow to finish to larger breed to weans, there's a whole lot of variation in how much labor we really do need on these farms for the number of sows. So after we got those results, we said, okay, we need a little bit better idea of this. So SMS conducted a survey with 56 farms, and we looked at number of sows per team member again. They are ranked from the lowest number of sows, 113, all the way out here to 418. And when we look at pigs weaned per mated female up this side, there's no correlation between team members and farm performance. That was true of death loss as well. So we asked those same 56 farms, what percent of your employees have been with the company for 2 years? And we got results that told us that 40% all the way down to 0. They had nobody that had been on the farm for 2 years. And we had farms that had 100% of the people for 2 years. But we have no correlation between experience and performance. That's kind of counterintuitive to what we think. The more we practice a sport, the better we get at it. The more we play an instrument, the better we get at it. So why would that not be true for the more experience we have at our job? So in this study, we asked 15 questions that were related to job satisfaction and employee engagement. And we used a scale from strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. And we're going to dive into a few of these, both the highs and the lows here in a minute. But I want to highlight the question here, and we'll look at it deeper too. I would rate working at this company as, and that was given a scale of 0 to 99. The study average for all 103 participants was an 84.2. So when we look at the 12 farms individually, again, the blue farms, those at 27.5 pigs weaned, they averaged 90.2. The rest of the farms, 82.6. Pretty significant difference. The overall strengths of the study, those that were rated the highest, were that they feel a great sense of satisfaction when they do their job well. These people coming to work every day, they want to do their job well. And that was first or second strongest in 11 of the 12 farms. The work I do is very meaningful to me, was first, second, or third in all of the farms. And I'm generally satisfied with the kind of work I do, second or third in all of the farms. So they like what they're doing. So why aren't they happy in their jobs? So the lowest, my pay is fair for the work I do. It was 13th or 14th in 11 of the 12 farms, but a huge range from 2.7 to 6. So a 2.7 would be a disagree to a 6 of a agree. And there is a lot of variation in these farms from a region standpoint. So a job competition, as well as the part of the country that they're in, plays a role in some of that wage stuff we'll look at more. Next was senior managers understand what is really happening at this company, and there was more range there in how farms evaluated that. And then my coworkers contribute to my job satisfaction with even more range. That was from 4th to 14th in the farms. So there was one farm that was actually the lowest rate, even lower than my pay is fair. So when we look at the 12 farms and we look at their average wage that goes up the left side versus their experience with the orange bar, or with the orange lines, what this really says is there was no difference between the high-performing farms and the low-performing farms for wage or experience. When we look at my pay is fair and how the respondents answered, so if they strongly disagreed, there was 2.2% that fell into that category. We look at the job satisfaction score with that, it's not a linear progression. So pay is not a determining factor in how happy they really are with their jobs. As we look at the average wage, it does go up. But the lowest person in the survey was paid $11.25 an hour. They strongly agreed that that was fair. So this is very subjective. What is going on in your life? Is that an 18-year-old straight out of college or straight out of high school? Or do they have 5 kids? When we broke out the wages by position, all of the managers in the study were salaried employees, and we converted that to a 2,500 hours per year, so 48 hours, a 52-week, and got our average wage there. And then we also look at years of experience over here, and here's one of the kind of key takeaways for me is our techs, our entry-level breeding and farrowing technicians, have nearly the same experience as our leads. But then we've got a huge amount of experience in our managers. Why are we losing people? Where are we losing them? How do we fix some of these gaps? And I would say that it probably starts with our leads. So the average of the leads was $16.87, with just 3 of the 25 making more than $20 an hour. And about half of the leads were making less than people they were supervising. And when we look at this chart over here, we've got all kinds of competition with skilled labor workers, right? So when we look at that, only the carpenter starts at less than $20 an hour, but they're also the only ones that can make more than $50 an hour. And I would argue that we want our leads and our managers to be skilled labor positions, right? I would say we probably want our technicians, entry-level technicians, to be skilled laborers, but we're willing to give those on-the-job training, which sets skilled labor apart from that. But here's what's really scary to me. So when we look at by position, the job satisfaction scores, our leads are the most unhappy in their jobs. The people that have the most impact on what happens in our barns every day, directly supervising the most number of people in our barns every day, are the most unhappy in their job. When we ask the question, senior managers understand what's really happening at this company, we broke this out again by position, not a lot of variation. 5 is a slightly agree. My coworkers contribute to my job satisfaction. The managers agreed with that more than anybody else in the farm. And yet, those same managers tell me every day that the people are the hardest part of my job too, right? When the technician or even the managers thinking about their manager, my manager makes it easier to do my job. And we look at how they respond to that from a disagree, I think the battery's going, all the way up to a strongly agreed. Job satisfaction score is straight in line with that. So if they disagree that their manager does not make it easier to do their jobs, they are very unhappy in their jobs. It's a low number of people. If the manager isn't happy with them based off of their agreement to rehire them, they're not happy either. So not only is the manager not happy with them, the technician isn't happy in that position either. And so as we think about creating an irresistible place to work, is your company that place? And if not, what can you do? And here's where most farms need to start. So we ask our people to shower in. Why? For the farm's protection. And these aren't even the worst showers that I've seen, right? I actually was too embarrassed to take a picture of some of them. But this shower here is also in a pig barn. Which shower is going to get that job done for you consistently, day in and day out? And how much more does this one cost than that one? Not much. So Dr. Coleman talked this morning about keeping score and how long do any of us want to play or do anything if we're not keeping score. Basketball, extra sleeving of sows, walking extra pens. What is that impact on the farm's performance? And I like this quote, if you're not keeping score, it's only practice. And I think we're playing the most important game every day of the year in our barns. So let's not practice. Let's know where we're at. And then this quote by Michael Phelps, we've got to have goals. And they've got to be hard. We want to be challenged. And so have those goals not so far out that they can't be attained. But once you achieve them, have a big celebration. And then say, now I want to push you even more. Because if we think back to those people that we respect the most from high school, college, they're the coaches and the professors that pushed us to do better, to be better, and to have bigger goals. So this is the team that worked on this project, and it was a lot of hours and a lot of hard work, but we feel like we've been able to get some really good results from it to be able to help the industry. And again, we want to thank our sponsors for helping us bring this to you guys.